The silent observers. The great assembly hall of station harmony stretched like a metallic cathedral through the void of space. Its transparent walls offered a breathtaking view of the Andromeda Nebula, where distant stars painted swirls of purple and gold against the cosmic darkness. Inside this magnificent structure, representatives from 47 different species gathered in what had become the most important diplomatic meeting in galactic history. Dr. Sarah Chen sat quietly in the human observation section, her fingers dancing across a tablet as she documented the proceedings. Unlike the other delegates who wore elaborate ceremonial garments or advanced technological suits, Sarah dressed simply in a plain gray uniform with the Earth Federation insignia. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her dark eyes observed everything with careful attention. Next to her, Captain Marcus Webb leaned back in his chair with an expression of mild interest. The seasoned military officer had seen enough conflicts to recognize the patterns, but his relaxed posture suggested he found this particular gathering more educational than urgent. His weathered hands rested calmly on his lap while chaos erupted around them. The source of that chaos stood at the center of the hall. General Thrix of the Zephyrian Empire towered 8 feet tall, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights. Each word he spoke resonated through built-in amplifiers in his throat, making his voice boom across the assembly like rolling thunder. 3 standard cycles. Thrix roared, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically. 3 cycles of unprovoked aggression from the Corvan Collective. And still the humans sit in their corner taking notes like students in a classroom. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled delegates. The Altarian representative, a being that resembled a walking tree with silver bark, swayed forward to speak. General Thrix speaks truth. The Corvans have destroyed 17 of our agricultural worlds. Our people starve while Earth's children play in their gardens. Commander Vex of the Corvan Collective rose from the opposing section. Unlike Thrix's imposing crystal form, Vex appeared almost ethereal, his translucent blue skin revealing flowing energy patterns beneath. When he spoke, his voice carried the sound of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The Zephyrians began this conflict when they claimed sovereignty over the neutral zone mining worlds. Vex said, his tone somehow both beautiful and cold. We merely defended our legitimate territorial interests. If anyone should be called aggressors, it is those who break centuries-old treaties. Lies. Thrix's amplified voice shook the station's walls. Your people attacked our civilian transports without warning. After your military escorts fired on our survey vessels, Vex countered, his energy patterns flaring brighter with emotion. Sarah continued typing her notes, occasionally glancing up to observe the body language of various delegates. She made particular note of how the smaller species huddled together in obvious fear, while the larger powers positioned themselves as far from each other as possible. The patterns of alliance and hostility played out like a complex dance that she found fascinating from an anthropological perspective. Captain Webb checked his chronometer and sighed quietly. How long do you think they'll keep this up? He whispered to Sarah. The formal accusation should continue for another 47 minutes, she replied without looking up from her tablet. Then we'll move to the testimony phase, which typically lasts 3 hours. After that comes the plea for intervention, which is really what this whole gathering is about. As if summoned by her prediction, the elderly Chancellor Morix of the Galactic Mediation Council raised his staff for attention. The ancient being's turtle-like features showed the wear of centuries spent resolving conflicts. His voice, though weak with age, carried the authority of his office. The Council recognizes that formal accusations have been presented by both parties, Chancellor Morix announced. We now call upon neutral parties to offer testimony regarding the current state of this conflict. The testimony that followed painted a picture of galactic devastation. Species after species took the floor to describe the horrors they had witnessed. The rabbit-like Fenari spoke of refugee camps overflowing with displaced families. The aquatic thalassans reported poisoned oceans on 3 of their worlds. The insectoid chitin collective described entire hive cities reduced to ash. Through it all, the human delegation remained quietly attentive but showed no signs of emotional distress. Sarah continued her documentation, while Captain Webb occasionally asked clarifying questions about military tactics or casualty figures. Their calm demeanor stood in sharp contrast to the growing agitation of the other delegates. 17 billion casualties, reported the mechanical voice of a Synthetic Alliance representative. 43 worlds rendered uninhabitable. Economic damage exceeding 800 trillion galactic credits. All of this could be prevented if the humans would simply choose a side and intervene. This statement brought the assembly to its feet. Delegates from dozens of species turned to face the human section, their various forms of expression all conveying the same message. Desperation mixed with growing anger. The humans possessed the largest merchant fleet in known space, called out the Vothan delegate, his rocky exterior cracking with emotion. Their ships travel safely through both Zephyrian and Corvan space. They could blockade either side and end this war in cycles. Earth's defensive technology is legendary, added the Spiral Arm Coalition representative. One human battle group could tip the balance of any engagement. Why do they refuse to act? Sarah finally looked up from her tablet. She studied the faces turned toward her, noting the mixture of hope and frustration in their expressions. When she spoke, her voice was clear and measured. The Earth Federation maintains a policy of careful observation during galactic conflicts, she said. We believe that premature intervention often creates more problems than it solves. Premature. General Thrix's voice cracked with disbelief. After 3 cycles of war, you consider intervention premature. We prefer to understand the full scope of a situation before taking action, Captain Webb added. Rushing into complex conflicts without proper analysis tends to make things worse. Analysis. Commander Vex's energy patterns pulsed with what could only be described as bitter laughter. While you analyze, children die. While you observe, civilizations fall. What more do you need to understand? Sarah exchanged a brief glance with Captain Webb. In that moment, something passed between them that the alien delegates couldn't interpret. Sarah's expression softened slightly, and she set down her tablet. We understand more than you might think, she said quietly. For instance, we know that the Zephyrian Empire has been developing quantum disruptor weapons in secret facilities in the Outer Rim. We know that the Corvan Collective has been experimenting with temporal manipulation technology in direct violation of the Galactic Accords. We know that both sides have been recruiting mercenary forces from the rogue systems. We know that this conflict has very little to do with mining rights or territorial sovereignty. The assembly fell silent. General Thrix's crystalline form seemed to dim, while Commander Vex's energy patterns slowed to barely visible flows. The other delegates looked back and forth between the opposing sides with growing understanding and horror. This war is about testing new weapons systems, Captain Webb continued. Both sides are using the conflict as a proving ground for technologies that they hope will give them decisive advantages in future conflicts. The civilian casualties are just acceptable losses in their research and development programs. That's not true, General Thrix protested, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. The quantum disruptor test on the Altarian colony world of Verdant III was particularly illuminating, Sarah said, consulting her tablet. The weapon was designed to disrupt molecular bonds in organic matter. The fact that it killed 3 million farmers was simply data to be recorded and analyzed. And the temporal manipulation experiment that erased the Fenary moon from the timeline, Captain Webb added. Very impressive technology. The fact that 12 billion Fenary never existed was apparently worth the scientific breakthrough. The assembly erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted accusations, demands for explanations, and calls for immediate justice. But General Thrix and Commander Vex remained silent, their body language confirming the humans' accusations. Chancellor Morix struck his staff repeatedly, finally restoring order. When the noise died down, he turned to the human delegation, with an expression of newfound respect. "How long have you known about these weapons programs?" he asked. "Since before the war began," Sarah replied. "We've been monitoring the military buildup on both sides for several years. We knew that this conflict was inevitable once both sides committed to their research programs." "Then why didn't you prevent it?" the Altarian delegate demanded, his silver bark darkening with grief. "If you knew what was coming, why did you let it happen?" Sarah stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and careful. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight of authority that surprised many of the delegates. "Because sometimes the only way to stop a larger war is to allow a smaller one to run its course," she said. "The Zephyrian Empire and the Corvin Collective have been building toward a massive confrontation for decades. If we had intervened earlier, we would have simply delayed the inevitable while both sides continued developing even more dangerous weapons. Instead," Captain Webb added, "we chose to observe and document. We studied their tactics, their technologies, and their weaknesses. We waited for the right moment to act." "And when is the right moment?" Chancellor Morix asked. Sarah smiled for the first time since the assembly began. It was not a pleasant expression. "When both sides have revealed all their capabilities and exhausted their military reserves," she said. "When their new weapons have been tested and catalogued. When they've demonstrated exactly how dangerous they can be to galactic civilization." She paused, looking around the assembly at the frightened faces of the delegates. "When they've given us no choice but to stop them permanently." The assembly hall fell silent except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Outside the transparent walls, the Andromeda Nebula continued its eternal dance of creation and destruction, indifferent to the drama playing out in the small metal structure floating in its vicinity. "The right moment," Sarah continued, "is now. When humanity acts." The silence that followed Sarah's declaration stretched like a held breath across the assembly hall. Then, as if responding to some invisible signal, the lights dimmed and the transparent walls began displaying tactical holographs showing fleet movements throughout the galaxy. The delegates gasped as they recognized the scope of what they were seeing. "Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings," Captain Webb said, rising from his chair, "allow me to introduce Admiral James Rodriguez, commanding officer of the Earth Federation's peacekeeping initiative." A new figure materialized in the center of the hall, projected from somewhere far beyond Station Harmony. Admiral Rodriguez appeared to be in his 50s, with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected billions of lives. His dark eyes surveyed the assembly with the same calm assessment that had characterized the human delegation throughout the proceedings. "Greetings, honored delegates," the Admiral said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's communication systems. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but circumstances have required us to accelerate our timeline." General Thrix's crystalline form flickered with agitation. "What is the meaning of this? Where are you transmitting from?" "Currently, I'm aboard the EFS Prometheus, positioned approximately 50,000 kilometers from your current location," Admiral Rodriguez replied, "along with the rest of the 7th Fleet, which has been monitoring this situation since the assembly began." The holographic displays shifted to show the space around Station Harmony. What had appeared to be empty void was suddenly revealed to be occupied by over 200 human vessels, their adaptive camouflage systems disengaging to reveal sleek, modern designs unlike anything the alien delegates had seen before. Commander Vex's energy patterns pulsed with what appeared to be fear. "This is a violation of the Neutral Zone Accords. No military vessels are permitted within. The Accords were violated the moment your forces and the Zephyrians began testing prohibited weapons on civilian populations," Admiral Rodriguez interrupted. "As of 4 hours ago, the Earth Federation has declared both the Zephyrian Empire and the Corvin Collective to be rogue states threatening galactic stability. You are both under arrest." The assembly erupted into chaos once again, but this time the shouting was different. Instead of angry accusations, the delegates were asking questions, seeking clarification, and expressing relief that someone was finally taking action. "You cannot simply declare us criminals," General Thrix roared. "The Zephyrian Empire has existed for over 2,000 years. We are a founding member of the Galactic Council, and the Corvin Collective has maintained peaceful relations with over 100 species," Commander Vex added, his voice taking on desperate harmonics. "This is an act of war against both our peoples." Sarah activated her tablet, and the holographic displays shifted to show detailed intelligence reports. The Zephyrian Empire has conducted 17 illegal weapons tests in the past 6 months, resulting in the deaths of over 4 billion civilians. The Corvin Collective has performed 12 temporal manipulation experiments, erasing entire populations from the timeline. These are not the actions of civilized governments. Furthermore, Captain Webb added, "Both of your militaries are currently positioning fleets for what your own strategic analyses indicate will be a final battle using planet-killing weapons. The projected casualty count exceeds 40 billion lives." The delegates fell silent as the implications sank in. Chancellor Morix leaned heavily on his staff, his ancient features showing profound exhaustion. "What do you propose to do about this situation?" Admiral Rodriguez's expression softened slightly. "We propose to do what we've always done: protect innocent lives and maintain peace. But this time, we'll do it on a scale that matches the threat." The holographic displays changed again, showing human fleets moving throughout the galaxy. Not just the ships around Station Harmony, but hundreds of vessels emerging from hidden positions near both Zephyrian and Corvin space. The scope of the operation was staggering. "Operation Shepherd began 18 months ago," the Admiral explained. "While the Zephyrians and Corvins were focused on their war games, we were positioning assets throughout the galaxy. Every major military installation, every weapons research facility, every fleet concentration has been under constant surveillance." "Impossible," General Thrix said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Our security networks would have detected such an operation." "Your security networks were designed to detect conventional threats," Sarah replied. "Human technology has advanced considerably since our last major military deployment. We've learned to be very quiet when we want to be." The displays showed detailed schematics of Zephyrian and Corvin military installations, complete with internal layouts and security protocols. The level of intelligence was so comprehensive that several delegates gasped in amazement. "How is this possible?" asked the Synthetic Alliance representative. "Such intelligence gathering would require years of infiltration and espionage." "It required careful observation and patience," Captain Webb replied. "Two qualities that humans have in abundance. While you were all focused on the dramatic battles and political maneuvering, we were watching, learning, and preparing." Admiral Rodriguez gestured, and the displays shifted to show real-time tactical situations. At this moment, human forces are moving to secure all Zephyrian and Corvin military assets. We're not destroying them. We're simply ensuring they can't be used to threaten innocent populations. "This is impossible," Commander Vex protested. "Our fleets are the most advanced in the galaxy. Our weapons can manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself." "Your weapons are impressive," Admiral Rodriguez agreed, "but they have a critical flaw. They require extensive preparation and targeting systems that are vulnerable to electronic interference. Human technology has moved beyond conventional electronics into quantum-entangled processing systems that your weapons cannot affect." As if to demonstrate his point, the displays showed Zephyrian and Corvin warships throughout the galaxy suddenly going dark. One by one, entire fleets were being disabled by invisible forces. The weapons that had terrorized dozens of worlds were rendered harmless in a matter of minutes. "You're shutting down their fleets," Chancellor Morix observed with amazement, "without firing a shot." "Violence should always be the last resort," Sarah said. "We prefer to solve problems with minimal bloodshed. These crews will be returned to their homeworlds once their governments agree to disarm their prohibited weapons programs." General Thrix slumped in his chair, his crystalline form flickering with what appeared to be defeat. "What do you want from us?" Accountability, Admiral Rodriguez replied. Full disclosure of all weapons programs, reparations for the civilian populations you've harmed, and immediate cessation of all military activities pending a full investigation. And if we refuse? Commander Vex asked, though his energy pattern suggested he already knew the answer. Then you'll remain under protective custody until such time as your governments choose more reasonable representatives, the Admiral said. We're not interested in conquest or domination. We simply want the killing to stop. The Altarian delegate stood up slowly, his silver bark gleaming in the dim light. What about the rest of us? What about the species that have been caught in the middle of this conflict? Admiral Rodriguez's expression warmed considerably. The Earth Federation is prepared to offer full humanitarian aid to all affected populations. We have medical ships, agricultural vessels, and reconstruction teams ready to deploy immediately. The suffering ends today. And who will govern the galaxy? Asked the Fenari representative, her rabbit ears twitching with nervousness. If the Zephyrians and Corvins are removed from power, who will maintain order? The same people who maintained it before this war began, Sarah replied. The Galactic Council, the Mediation Service, and the various regional governments. Humans have no desire to rule over other species. We prefer to remain in the background, watching and learning. But ready to act when innocent lives are threatened, Captain Webb added, as we've demonstrated today. The assembly began to buzz with conversation as delegates processed the implications of what they'd witnessed. Some appeared relieved, others seemed concerned about the implications of human power, and a few looked excited about the prospect of peace. Chancellor Morix struck his staff for attention. This has been the most extraordinary session in the history of the Galactic Assembly. I believe we need time to process these developments and consider our response. Of course, Admiral Rodriguez agreed. Take all the time you need. Human forces will maintain their current positions until the situation is resolved. We're not going anywhere. As the assembly began to disperse, Sarah gathered her notes and prepared to leave. Several delegates approached her with questions, but she directed them to the appropriate diplomatic channels. The real work of building a lasting peace would begin in the coming days and weeks. General Thrix and Commander Vex were escorted away by human security personnel, their faces showing the resignation of leaders who had finally met a force they couldn't overcome. The war that had consumed the galaxy for 3 years was ending not with a massive battle, but with the quiet efficiency of a people who had learned the value of patience and preparation. As the station's lights returned to normal and the holographic displays faded, Captain Webb turned to Sarah with a slight smile. Think it'll stick this time? It'll have to, she replied, closing her tablet. The galaxy is too dangerous for this kind of behavior to continue. Sometimes the strongest action is knowing when not to act, and knowing when you must. Outside the transparent walls of Station Harmony, the human fleet maintained its silent vigil. The Andromeda Nebula continued its eternal dance, but now it did so over a galaxy where the rule of law had been quietly, efficiently, and decisively restored by a species that preferred to watch from the shadows but would not hesitate to act when justice demanded it. The age of destructive testing was over. The age of careful observation and strategic intervention had begun, and somewhere in the depths of space, human eyes continued to watch, ready to act whenever the innocent needed protection from those who would abuse their power. Humanity had spoken. The galaxy had listened, and peace, fragile but real, began to take root once more among the stars.